G'day, Alan Stevens here, host of the Campfire Project. Welcome here today for another panel discussion. And today I have with me Rose Davidson, advocate for family and domestic violence and president of Stella Bella Social Enterprise. How are you, Rose?
Very well, Alan. Thank you for having me again today. I'm interested in discussing the topic of what we've decided on. Yeah, it sounds really interesting and
looking forward to it too. And then we have Michael Lauria, men's coach and author of Excalibur. How are you, Michael?
I'm always good, thank you, Alan, and I appreciate coming on again.
It's good to have you. The good thing is I love the panels when we have both men and women on here, because we get both views, not just a male view and not just a female view, which I think is great. The subject we've just been banding around just before coming on air, guys, and we were thinking about the sense of identity. With everybody losing jobs in large numbers, what's our sense of identity here at home, and especially for the men? And because you're a men's coach, Michael, would you like to start us off on this?
Yeah, sure. Traditionally, men are seen as the providers, or take on, even if they're not seen as that, they take on that role within their families and within the community. And so what we're finding is that in the current climate, with a lot of people losing jobs at the moment, and men are very deeply attached and find a sense of identity around their job and their status and their income and being able to keep a roof over their family's head and food on the table. And so in the current climate where we're finding a lot of people are losing their jobs, it's really starting to call into question for men. And I talk to men every day, and I'm finding that men are really struggling because they have attached themselves to this sense of security and stability that a job brings. And that's what they've really worked towards for many, many years in a career, just to build a career and build, climb the corporate ladder, for instance, and get to this point where they can confidently provide for their families. And all of a sudden, the carpet's been pulled out from under them and they can't do that anymore. And so when a man's deeply identified with their job and their ability to provide for their family, and then all of a sudden they don't have the job and they can't provide, that really calls into question their values and purpose in life and their purpose to their children and partner, and at what level they can even do that. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for men to start to connect a lot more deeply with what's really important, and they're the things that they really value, which is usually family and their partner and their relationships. And start to structure and restructure and reframe their life around that.
Yeah, I can see that being important because, as you said, the men are focused on their the work as having been their identity. Well, stop and think for a moment. Why were you at work in the first place? What was the intent there? It was to bring the money home to look after the family. Mm-hmm. So coming back to what's really important, I think is really, really necessary. How about you, Rose?
Yeah, I think with men now being out of work, I think it's a great opportunity, as Michael said, to reassess their values and spend more time with their families, I think, and reconnect with them and start getting off their phones and playing and having dinner together, playing games with their children if they have them, and do what we used to do in the old days when all of us were young. You'd all sit around the dinner table and talk about your day. You play a board game with your child or children. You go out in the backyard and, play cricket or basketball or whatever. And it's a good time, I think, now for men to take off their work hat and put on their dad hat or their husband hat or partner hat or whatever it might be. I think they need to actually, just step into a different role in this time, because they've got a few weeks now to do it. And I think they have to look within themselves and dig out that compassion and connection role that is so important in families.
Yeah, because if they're an employee, there's really nothing they can really do because they're not at their work, unless they're a business where they can do some work from home. So they've got that time. They don't have their mind okay is on the fact they haven't got money coming in, but it's not going to be on the work. So for them, it should be easier to be able to connect back to their family, take that time and realise what's really important, why they do the things that they do outside of the family for the family itself. and the men who are working from home need to be able to organise their time frame. So yes, they can get the work done that they have to get done, but because they're now in tight quarters, I can see a lot of stress and pressures going, increasing simply because they're trying to get that done, and now they've got the kids making noise or their partner trying to talk to them and things like that, and that therefore causes some stress. So
yeah, it's an interesting perspective, because I can tell you personally, I've been working from home for years now. So working from home is just second nature to me, and I've already built up good practices. But most people commute to an office. They go to an office and they work at an office, and then they come home, and it's a real interesting time for people who now have to work from home, because it's a real opportunity for them to start to really gain some clarity around this whole work-life balance thing that people talk about. And instead of trying to achieve balance, it can be more about integration. How do I integrate my work and my family life, my personal life, and how do I honour, what I need to do for work, but also honour the fact that my family's here and that they know that I'm here too, and trying to develop some understandings there between the person that's working from home and children who know that dad or mum is in the next room and they want to spend time with them, but you've got to honour work as well. And it's also, I think we go a little bit deeper, and I always do, because as I say to people, I don't swim in the shallow end. And so when we look a little bit deeper, it's a real opportunity for people to learn how to deeply self-reflect. And that is to really deeply self-reflect. What have I attached myself to? What's my sense of purpose? How do I reframe and reform my own sense of identity? Because I'm starting to realise that actually nothing is in my control, and the illusion of stability and safety and security that I thought I had, or all of this stuff that I thought I had, is actually an illusion because I've attached it to something external to myself. And so it's really a good opportunity to deeply reflect and start to, as I said before, connect with values, what's really important, and then a sense of purpose as well. Because when we have a sense of purpose, we then can extrapolate out and go, okay, well, how do I want to spend my days after this is all said and done? Do I want to go back to that job again? Who are the people that I really want to spend time with? What's really important to me? And we start to do something that I like to call a life audit, where you really look at your whole life and all the sections of your life, and you go, what's serving me and what isn't? It's a beautiful opportunity and time of our lives now in society to be able to deeply self-reflect and then move into whatever the next evolution of society is, move into that with a greater sense of self and a deeper level of self-awareness and the ability to deeply self-reflect and make better choices as we're moving through this, and whatever the next evolution of society and humanity becomes as a result.
I think it's go ahead, Rose. You're going to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking that's a really great, philosophy to have. And I just want to turn this around a little bit. A lot of the wage earners, male wage earners, corporate. Some of them are corporate people. It's not just blue collar people. I want to turn this around a little bit to the ones that are now in close proximity to a partner that they abuse. How do we get them to change their mindset because that usually they just come home and they just do what they do. Now they're sitting at home, working from home perhaps, and the stresses, as Michael pointed out, that's going to add extra to the stresses that's already at home. How do men and how can we get men to self-reflect and realise that what they're doing is not okay?
That's it. So that's one of the things I realised that was going to happen as soon as I talked about shutdowns. I was thinking, right, domestic violence is going to go up. Bullying of the children, abuse of children would go up as well, because people were going out to work to get away from all of that, and then now they're going to be in it 24/7. So if they weren't coping before, and some people were near the border of going into becoming abusers, how many of those now step into that role of being an abuser? And how do we go about, it comes down to the only way to stop that is for them to become aware. So it's really, how do we help them to become aware? of different ways to do things so that they can feel better about them in themselves and therefore not take the steps against somebody else.
I think there's a lot to be said here about self-responsibility, and it's so incredibly tragic and you know, I was going to say unfortunate. It's more than unfortunate. It's tragic that there are a lot of families that will be subject to more intense, you know, domestic violence. And at the end of the day, no matter what we want to say or do in terms of domestic violence, the perpetrator, more often than not, is the man, more often than not. And we can, you know, a lot of men come up with lots of excuses as well. She provoked me and the kids were this and whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, really, the main perpetrators of physical domestic abuse are men. And as Alan was saying before, it's about awareness, but then the challenge is to become, well, how do we get these guys to become more self-aware, to realise that they're behaving inappropriately and abusing children and their partners? And so how do we get to that point? And so one of the things, and I'm not trying to self-promote here at all, but I did a survey for my book, Forging Excalibur, and the survey was all around what men actually value. And so when we find that when men become frustrated and then eventually violent, if it gets to that, the underlying issue is really a lack of a sense of meaning and purpose in life, right? They don't feel like they have a sense of meaning in their relationship or a sense of purpose in life. And so what they do is they don't have the tools available to them, or they haven't learned the tools available to them, or they're not taking responsibility for their state, whatever the case may be, to learn how to deeply connect with themselves and reflect and get in touch with what it is that they truly need as a man. And one of the surveys that I did was, when you look at what you truly value as a man, what is it? Is it money? Is it success? Is it all these other things? And what 97.8% of men said is that what they truly value is their intimate relationship with their partner and their children, the relationship they have with their children. So when we start to bring that message out there, it's like, well, on the surface, this is what's happening for you, but deeper, if you're part of the nearly 98% of men out there, what's happening deeper is that you're actually frustrated that you can't be the version of yourself that you want to for your children and your partner, and they are the ones that are suffering as a result. So if you truly value them, then it's time to take responsibility for you and your behaviour and how you're choosing to be in that environment and start to make some changes. So
how do we get that message out there, Michael? You know, how do we get? Yeah, but we can't get into people's houses and, you know, view what they're doing, because, you know, most of the times the victim, not victim, survivor. Sorry, we don't call them victims. The survivor, you know, doesn't tell. You know, it's kept secret.
Yeah, so as you said before, one thing I'd like to go back to very quickly, if I can, is the percentage, that 98.7% of men. The survey, was that a large survey or a small survey? Because the thing we're wondering about there is, if we've got so many men, domestic violence is such a high level at the moment and getting higher with this situation, and there were so many men who said they valued their partners. Well, of those people, if that was a large group of people, if it was all the ones that don't abuse their partners, there was none of those in there, or a lot of men in there were telling furfies. They weren't telling the truth.
Well, look, that's what they value. Whether they are being abusive and violent is a different, that wasn't part of the survey, right? It was really about, what do you truly value? So those men, some of those men, a percentage of those men could likely be abusers. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just talking about what they truly value.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then how do we link their value, get them to realise that this is what their value was, and then look at what they're doing? And then, as you said, it does come down to personal responsibility. It doesn't matter if your partner has been nagging you to the point where you lose your temper. The point where you lose your temper was your choice. It doesn't matter what the partner's doing.
Yeah, leave the room. Don't hit anybody. Go and leave the room. Go and find a punching bag. Go and do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're the man who's got to that level where you're at that point where you're at breaking point, but your values are about your partner. At that point, how do we get them stopping to think about losing it, to realising what their values were and reconnecting with that, not taking the next step?
So can I tell a story here? I am a survivor of domestic violence. I'm still with my husband, who was the perpetrator, and that sounds ridiculous. However, he learned after, because he grew up thinking that he was the boss, and what he said was gospel, and I wasn't allowed to go against anything. But he learned, he took responsibility for his actions, and the abuse stopped. And we have a really loving relationship now. And I know through the abuse that he loved me. It wasn't. It's just that he didn't know how to act. He just thought it was part of, if you don't do what I tell you, I'll just smack you in the head. But he learned. It took a few years, but he did learn that it wasn't okay to hit, and it wasn't okay. I think the positive side was, as I fought back one night, and I got so angry that he went to hide behind the shed. So that was when he learned that it wasn't okay to hit. Because
can I ask a question, Roy?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that was learned behaviour, or did he just come out one day and decide to be violent?
No, it was a learned behaviour. His father was violent. His stepfather was violent. My husband left home at 14 and went and worked on cattle stations up in North Queensland. So he didn't know any better. He just thought it was, what men do. Men are the boss, and men, a woman just does what she's told. But I'm happy to say that I've come out of the other side, and I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to tell that story. People think I'm a bit odd staying with my husband, but I loved my husband, and I knew that he could learn to be different. And I think men in general can learn that and still have the values, Michael, as you said, that if they can only just learn that the value is more important than themselves. So look outside of yourself and see, as you said, that men value that family thing. Get them to realise that they don't need to hit to be. They don't need to be the boss. The woman's not the punching bag, and she's not there for you to at your beck and call. She's your partner. She's your equal, and so the sooner men learn that, I think it's a lot better. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Well, as you said, it's a learnt behaviour, as Michael said there. With we think of D'Angelo Singh, who's been on the Campfire Project. He grew up in a household where his father was very violent towards his mother. His mother would take off for a few days and then come back to home again. He told about how his father threw his mother through the window one day, right through the glass. And they just grew up thinking that was normal. It all changed when he was 15 years old and he's protecting his 2 younger brothers and sisters while he watched his father stab his mother to death.
Oh,
so
my father was very violent man as well, and I'd seen him. Well, he was mainly violent to myself and my brother. I don't recall. He hit Mum a few times, but not more violent. And he'd get all the furniture and chuck it down the stairs, and we had no beds, and we had no crockery, and we had no anything. He was just off the planet. So I grew up with that, so I knew that violence wasn't okay.
Yeah, so all of that was learned behaviour. It's like D'Angelo, as I said, that's what they grew up with, but then he realised it wasn't right. He now works in the area of reducing domestic violence. But and so if we look at, I know the stats I was saying about 15, 20 years ago that as far as psychopaths or sociopaths went, it was only 1% of the population. So if the people who are born differently are, and that's the term I'll use there, are different to other people, it's so small, but they have so many men who are, and there's women as well, so many people who are perpetrating domestic violence, then most of those would probably have been learnt behaviours because they weren't born that way. So it's in the learning, and anything you learn, you can, it's not so much unlearn, but you can revalue and learn new ways of doing things. So they can learn how the relationship should be if they're able to focus more on, well, if their value is so great, this is where it's a great time to contemplate. If your value was your partner, and you concentrate on that, and you look at your children and what you want your future to be, how you want their future to be, you're starting to retrain yourself. But at the same time, be able to reach out to people like you guys that do this work in these areas so that they can learn from you as well.
Yeah, that's what my husband did. He just realised that it wasn't the right thing to do. And and I don't know, I would change the beginning of our marriage, but I wouldn't change what we have now. I think it's great, you know. A lot of women and men, you know, haven't got that choice, you know, especially now where you're not even allowed to leave your house. How are they going to escape? Where are they going to go to? You know, they've got their car maybe, but who wants to live in their car? And what if they've got, you know, 3 or 4 children? You know, I feel so sorry for them.
So if we're trying to help and look after the people who are being abused, to change that, we've really got to work on the ones that are doing the abusing. And it's not so much bullying them about what they're doing, but it's about guiding them through that they can become and feel better about themselves. Because
it's hard to reach them. It's hard to reach them. How are we going to reach those people with it? They think that, you know, that there's nothing wrong with it, or they won't admit to it. They think, you know, that they're not.
I think
they're not doing anything wrong. It's just a normal part of being a husband.
I think we can reach the ones who are ready to take responsibility. And we talked about learned behaviour. You know, learned behaviour, it goes so much deeper than just this is what I experience, so this is what I think is right. It's so much deeper than that, because if these men as children were experiencing domestic violence in their parents' relationship, then that creates a paradigm, a subconscious paradigm. And so then what happens is that they continue then to reenact that and behave in exactly the same ways that they've experienced in their adult life. And that gentleman, D'Angelo, that you were talking about before, Alan, what happened with him was he obviously had an emotional impact. There was a situation where he had to protect his family members. And so there was enough of an emotional impact there for him to realise that was wrong and that he shouldn't have to do that, and that it was a very damaging and toxic situation to be in. And so that was enough for him to break that paradigm and become somebody different than what he would have become. And so where we need to really try to, you know, it's so important to try to get to those guys or those people who think that it's okay to abuse others. We definitely need to get to them, but I think people come to their awarenesses at different points, and there's an emotional impact point that people come to, and not that it's okay, but there's not a lot we can do until people come to the realization that this is wrong and I need to take responsibility for my actions. And that's where we can start to create some change in people, because until then they truly are connected to the paradigm and they believe there's nothing wrong with it. And not that I condone that or that it's right, that just simply is.
Well, it's not a matter of right and wrong, it's a matter of what is.
It's a matter of what is. And until we get to that point, until people get to that point where they go, yes, this is wrong and I want to change because I realise that I truly value my family and that I stand to lose them, it's at that point that men will usually reach out for help. It's at that point. Prior to that, they don't believe that there's anything wrong, so why would they reach out for help? And how do we help those men if they don't want to be helped, or those people if they don't want to be helped at this point?
That's the question. I think also I had a thought then, but now it's disappeared. I can continue on.
And we were talking before about how alcohol is now banned. You can't buy alcohol, and I think that's a great thing. I think it's actually a really good thing, and there's going to be downfalls to that too. Not that I think alcohol consumption is a good thing, especially excessive, but when you've got somebody who manages their state with alcohol, even if it's just 2 or 3 beers or a glass of wine, and that kind of just lowers the blood pressure and brings it all down for them, and then when they can't have that, that could escalate things even more, the fact that they don't have access to alcohol. And I know that sounds really counterintuitive, but in these times when we've got people feeling like they're stuck, some people will feel like they're stuck, other people will feel like it's a wonderful opportunity that they're grateful to spend more time with their family. But for people who have unhealthy behaviours, unhealthy mindsets, they'll feel stuck. And that's really going to start to bring out the worst in their behaviour. So I'm with you, Rose. We need to reach those people. I'm just not sure how, aside from doing what we're doing here. And
turning around again, friends or family that know that there is violence in the home, and they don't do anything. You know, how do we reach those and say, well, you know, you, especially now when people are locked up, you know, we need to get them to check on the family member or whatever, or friend or whatever, more often, I think, to see that the survivor is surviving. Do you know? Does that make sense?
I know a lot of people are afraid to step up because they don't want to get involved because
exactly.
Another. But if we don't, you know, and at this point in time, I think the fact that we are all isolated, we're all missing being connected, that may mean that some of the people who have been turning a blind eye before because it just didn't want to get involved, may be starting to rethink that and going, hey, we are becoming more of a global community. The fact that we aren't going to work, that we're isolated, and those things going up online these days, more people running groups and having talks and things, that we're becoming a bit more connected through the internet. We're using the internet the way it should be used instead of something to have a go at people, but something to bring people together. That some of those people may then respond to that. But it's a case of knowing the right way to go and have a word with that person. Because you've got somebody who feels that people are having a go at them, and I'm talking about the perpetrator here, then the perpetrator and that is going to defend themselves and deny what they're doing and start fighting back, and they can become worse. So it's finding the right way of actually talking to them so that you can start to get through to them. It's like if you've got a child who's been bullied, they will then become a bully. And you don't fix a bully by beating the bully up. You fix the bully by helping to raise their self-esteem, but you do it with their victim at the same time. And so that you raise everyone's self-esteem up. When people are happy, they don't abuse other people. So how do we work on that side?
Absolutely. And I think a really good question to ask, if anyone's listening to this when it gets put up in a campfire project, if anyone's listening to this and you know whether you're an abuser or not, it's not a question. You'll know whether you're abusing your partner and your children or not. You will know. And so if you are, then this might be a really good message for you to listen to, because if you know that you're the abuser and you truly value your family, then it's time to do something about it. Because especially in these stages, we're moving into total lockdown soon, and things won't get better, they'll get worse. And I think you've already been avoiding enough already. Maybe it's time now to take this opportunity to become better, just to become a better quality human being, reprogram the paradigm, because it's may not necessarily be your fault, it might be learned behaviour. And so that makes you, I know we don't like to use the word victim, but that makes the abuser a victim of circumstance from the past. It doesn't condone the behaviour, but it does make them a victim of their paradigm. And the paradigm is what controls us, because the paradigm is in the subconscious, and the subconscious is more powerful than any choice that we make consciously to not hit our partner, to not be abusive, to realise what we value. They're all wonderful, beautiful things to say. They're very noble, but until we address the paradigm, nothing will actually change permanently.
And they have to realise, sorry, Michael, they all have to realise also that their family aren't things. They're not belongings. They're not things that you own. You know, they're people. They're not items. They're things to cherish. You don't own your wife. You don't own your children. It's not like you go to the shop and buy them. You know, and abusers need to understand that their family aren't things. They're things to be cherished. You promise your vows to honour and cherish your partner. You know, you didn't put your vows on. You know, I promised to hit you 3 times a day. So
it's a really good reflection point, because if we start to understand that violence and aggression and abuse, underlying all of that is a sense of control, and we only wish to exert control if there's something that we fear. And so when we look at this, again, deeper perspectives, right, and we look at the fact that we're trying to control the situation in our family and then we become abusive as a result, what a good reflection point is have a look at other aspects of your life. Are you trying to control other aspects too? Because more than likely you are, because one type of behaviour like that will permeate all the way through your life. Yeah. And so you'll find that you're getting undesirable results in actually every part of your life. Your family, your career, work, friends, etc., etc. You're getting similar results everywhere. And so the only common denominator is going to be you. And that's where it comes down to personal responsibility.
That's an excellent view. I like that.
Extremely important, because with the paradigm, if we're not looking at what's right and wrong, we're looking at what the situation is. So the men at the moment who are in this situation, you are locked at home, you're under more pressure than you were before. Therefore, you're taking something on your shoulders that others we haven't done before. So this is a time to actually reach out and say, hey, I need some help here before things actually get out of hand. Know that there are people like us, other people out there as well, who are going to look at you in a way of going, okay, you're in a situation, how can we help you? We're not looking to blame you and say that you're not good enough. What we're saying here is the situation is more than anyone can bear. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. So instead of letting that happen, now is the time to actually reach out and say to people, look, I am under pressure. You don't even have to talk about domestic violence. You have to talk about the emotions you're feeling, the pressure you're under, and how can I deal with this pressure? And you deal with your domestic violence that way, because we're worried about domestic violence being the stigma that people look at you as being a perpetrator of domestic violence and they're looking down the nose at you. We'll just talk about the emotions you're feeling, not the actions you're taking. Because if you work on the emotions, then the actions won't get taken. And that's how you deal with the domestic violence is don't focus on the act itself, but what brought you to that act, the pressure that's on you. Find people that you can talk to. It might even be the neighbour next door that knows a little bit of what's going on. Reach out to them and say, hey, I need a little bit of help. It could be through the Campfire Project. There's also a lot of other groups out there. And there's a lot of medical health organisations as well. Now's the time to reach out, because we've got more on our back than we've ever had on our back before, and nobody can carry that weight. We need each other. That's why we've got to come together as a global community.
Yeah, great.
Yep, exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself, Alan.
Thank you. And knowing how well you talk, I take that as a great compliment.
He's pretty smooth, isn't he?
He certainly is.
I just think I like to always look at what's below the surface, because it's what's below the surface and between the lines is where we find the answers and where we find solutions to our problems. And so if one of the problems here that this discussion seems to have evolved into sort of domestic violence, which is a really relevant discussion, especially under the circumstances, we've got to look at what's between the lines and under the surface, because when we look at, as Alan said, the behaviour, there's so much underneath that. When we focus on the behaviour, we're not focusing on a solution. When we start to go beneath that at the emotions, yes, but even deeper than that, thoughts. What thoughts are then provoking the emotions to incite the behaviour? And underneath the thought is a paradigm, right? So, which is really a fancy way of saying it's learned behaviour, repetitive learned behaviour. And so that's what I do in all my coaching. I help people reprogram paradigms, because trying to change behaviour without looking at the paradigms, it doesn't work.
Yes, I look at the survivor. That's where my focus is, and try and either get them through a current situation, or when they've come out the other side, if they've been lucky enough to do that, just give them some encouragement to continue to stay on the other side, and don't involve themselves in other relationships that are toxic and could get them into more trouble.
Yeah, because their self-worth comes from what they've accepted over that time, which will attract more to them. So we've got to look at it right across the board. We've got to have groups like yourself, Rose, who are working with these survivors to help them break their patterns of going through the same thing, but also helping them just to have a better life in themselves without even looking at another partnership. And at the same time, people like Michael and that, working with the perpetrators and finding those paradigms, finding those thoughts, finding those learned behaviours, and re-educating those. And so we've got to work with, you can't just work with one side, you've got to work with both sides.
Absolutely. Maybe you and I could talk, Rose. Maybe we can collaborate on something. But,
that would be great, yes.
I do want to put across a point, and that is that out of all of the men that I work with, and I work with quite a few men, there is only a very small percentage of them who have come to me as a result of the fact that they've realised that they are abusing their family. So it's not this massive proportion of men that are being violent in the home, but if there is that tendency, it's times like this that will bring that out.
Yeah. And I like to balance it out a little bit, because it's not just the men, as I said, it always ends up being the person who's most lost, etc., who becomes the violent partner. We know that in lesbian relationships, the percentage of abuse per capita is pretty much the same as the heterosexual relationships.
Exactly.
So it's not just a gender issue. So we talked about males today. Just remember, we're not having a go at men only. We're having a go at whatever it is beneath the surface is affecting both men and women. Because I know that if we had equal number of heterosexual relationships, the conversation would be about men and women, because the numbers are really equal.
Correct, yeah. But I mean, I deal mainly with women at this point. Our organisation is going to deal with men at a later date, because we just don't know how we can cater to them to, bring them the same sort of benefits as what we're offering women. But I do know that women can be perpetrators as well. They're quite violent in, I think a lot of women are more violent than men are. So, I mean, you've got to balance it out. As you said, Alan, it's not a gender thing, because it's probably equal proportions really, but men don't report their abuse because they think that it's not the right thing to do.
So it supports what Michael was saying before. We're moving away from looking at the genders, looking at what's wrong, but coming down and getting down into the paradigms, the thought processes and everything else. Once we get down there, we're no longer looking at or recognising that gender exists.
No, and I don't want to recognise that. I want to do what Michael is, and he can use his skills on either gender. It wouldn't matter. I mean, I know that you, Michael, that you deal with men, but your skills, you could, deal with women as well, because, you've got to change their mindsets as well.
Absolutely, because we're all human. We're all humans, right? So,
well, we try to be. We could
all
be aliens.
Who knows? That's a different campfire discussion. But yeah, absolutely. We're humans, and our minds work exactly the same. We have a conscious and a subconscious mind, and paradigms are programmed in exactly the same way, no matter whether we're women or men. And so, yes, absolutely, the same affliction, which is our subconscious mind, and the paradigms held within it, is spread across both. I'll be politically correct and say spread across all genders, not just both genders. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And that's been a great conversation. I'm really glad that both of you came in. We were talking about our sense of purpose and things like that, how we're going to deal with things. But domestic violence is one thing I think that is definitely going to be a large issue. And so we need the conversation to go around that today. I think has been brilliant. So. Rose and Michael, thank you very much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us. And
thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure.
Excellent. Right. And to everybody who's been listening in, I hope you've got some information out of that. If you know of anybody who's being abused, get in touch with these guys and get some ideas on how you can handle, how you can approach those people. If you are a guy and you're going through pressure, or if you're a woman going through pressure and you're worried about behaving the wrong way, as Michael said, think about what you really value first of all, and then go, right, if it is a relationship that you value the most, then put your hand out, reach out to these guys and others to see how you can handle that. Again, don't go looking at shame, feeling shameful for what you're doing, because at the moment we're under a situation where in this all of these generations that are alive at the moment haven't been through before. So this is new for all of us. So don't put too much.
It's, yeah, as you said, just reach out, and it doesn't matter. We're not going to blame you for anything. I mean, you just need to reach out to somebody. You know, there's plenty of organisations out there.
Yeah, because I won't blame somebody who reaches out. I will admire them for having the courage to realise that things aren't right and that they want to take steps to change it. And that's where the true courage in a person's going to be, when you recognise and you put your hand up.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And there's absolutely no judgment either.
That's it.
Yeah, there's no judgment.
Yeah, haven't lived that person's life, so there's no way I can judge them on their life.
Yes.
But anyway, again, guys, thanks very much for being here, and to everybody else who's been listening in. We'll see you on the next Campfire Project discussion. Bye for now.